Sai Ram. Today, I would like to speak about Vinima and the time we have been blessed to have spent with her over the years. Many devotees earlier requested that we pay tribute to her, which I found personally very difficult at the time. And this film is not really a biopic about her life, which we may do later on with Sada, but it's more about the insights and the precious gems we got by spending time with her, which was really our good fortune and blessings. It happened by Baba's grace. And apart from the wonderful work Ma shared, which is available to all through the films, there were many things that she shared behind the scenes, when we spent time with her. So, for some culmination of those meetings, discussions, some observations, I will share with you in the coming segments. So, I first heard of Vinima through some devotees, and they had asked that we interview her for the channel. So, I had actually emailed her and Sada, and after the first few interactions, she did not reply. So, at the time, I took it that maybe it was not the time, or maybe she was not interested. But as fate had it, or rather as Baba willed it, I happened to be in Shirdi when another friend of mine, who I had not met before, but he was very involved with the work, although he was based in the US, happened to also come to Shirdi while I was there. This was not planned, we didn't orchestrate this at all. To add to the level of coincidence, when we got in contact, he happened to be in the same hotel I was staying in and in the very adjacent room. So that was quite a coincidence. And he was in very close contact with Sada over the years. So he arranged for the first meeting. And I met Ma for the very first time at Baba Iyer's restaurant. And that's where it all had begun. In the very first conversation, Ma mentioned about having been blessed to have the darshan of Daskanu Maharaj as a child and having met Narsimha Swamiji. And it was quite overwhelming to just hear her speak about this while we were sitting there. And while I was certain I wanted to record these experiences and her insights on Baba's history and her research, uh, I even discussed with her our past email exchanges, and it was quite funny. She said, "Oh, I didn't reply to you because that list was very long." So I did share with her my feeling because she said, "Everything that I have done is written in my books. Why should this be recorded?" So I said, "Ma, just the way you narrated your meeting with Daskanu Maharaj and when you recited the way he would sing, I mean, just hearing that can give us chills. I obviously can't do it, but she had done the sign and she said he had a metallic voice. Unfortunately, no audio recordings of Maharaj were ever done. But that's when I said that, Ma, while everything is in the written word, your video recordings will have something which that medium of writing cannot hold. And that is something I feel we must do. It was not easy for her because I met her when she had already crossed 75, but her commitment to Baba was unparalleled, and she graciously agreed. So I had asked Ma to first begin the series on Baba's Mahabhaktas because while many devotees had read the Satcharit, just to get the viewpoint of all these devotees and their lives, I felt would give them a much deeper insight into the Charitra and into Baba's life as well. So she agreed, and we started our first film on Kaka Dikshit, and that was her favorite, most favorite devotee. Her commitment here, firsthand, we saw, sometimes because when we started in 2019, there were enormous crowds in Shirdi. We had the aartis that would happen 4 times a day. So the window period to do the recordings, because of the limitation of the sounds and noises and people coming, was very small. So we would actually record late night or early morning, as early as 2 a.m. And for her to make herself available for this was, I think, spoke volumes about her commitment, and Baba came first in her life. Sada's role here was also very important because he mediated this, and initially, obviously, it was not easy for Ma because to recollect so much information, have the camera set up, it was not something she was used to. And then closing the rooms, preparing it for recording, so much gear. So Sada also played a very vital role, and his help I'm always grateful for. As I spent more time with Ma in the subsequent weeks, the subsequent recordings, on with phone conversations with her, I also began to realize the magnitude of hardships she has gone through. To leave America, she was a medical practitioner, to come back to Shirdi, leave everything and be dedicated to Baba's prachar in those days where we didn't have the conveniences of the internet and all these modern amenities. Just the scale of it it's very hard to conceive of that today. So that's something I began to see in time, spending time with her, that the hardship she has endured, and that is all again by Baba's grace and blessings. She made no hue and cry of anything. And apart from that, she lived very close to the temple. So, on the second floor, if people visited her, some of you may know. But to go up and down with no lift, with her age, knee pain, all sorts of difficulties she endured. But till her very last days, she would take devotees for walking tours of Shirdi, uh, take them in every detail, explain about the significance of the places Baba would visit, where he would go, take them in her own car with Sada. They've taken thousands of people over the years. But I I cannot express what I felt, that what she has gone through with Seva Bhav is not ordinary at all. It is by His grace. For the last 35 years, she was in Shirdi. As she also grew older, naturally there were health concerns. But Shirdi was a small village. It was not what we know Shirdi as today. And to have to go out of Shirdi for medical care. So these are things people may have otherwise not thought of, but there were no conveniences she had, and she looked up to Kaka Dikshit. This is one thing, she really loved Kaka Dikshit, and she would almost see him like a guru like figure, and she would pray to him. She said, how did you go through what you did in those years? Give me the strength. She would say this, that I cannot even comprehend what you have gone through in the 1900s. But I said, see, if she sees that in Kaka, clearly she had those same qualities in herself to a very high extent. And to selflessly take and see so many people have literally no personal life of her own was a service that I feel is absolutely unparalleled. After Narasimha Swamiji's work of taking Baba's message out, I feel when everyone came to Shirdi knowing about Baba, it was her role. She single handedly propagated the history of Baba, the places Baba would visit, the significance of all these things was the role assigned to her, which she played beautifully. In the series we've done with Sada on the channel, he's already covered in great detail the service Vinima and Sada had rendered in terms of tracing back the descendants and the photo exhibitions they would do and a lot of work. But one aspect I feel which deserves some more limelight is the photographic work, the records that they made during their travels during the 80s and 90s, where there was no advent of digital technology, no internet, and they would actually take film cameras and go to all these places, traveling hundreds of kilometers and making a record, and more so painstakingly do these exhibitions just to propagate Baba's teachings, which I feel no words can describe this. And I hope in time with Sada we can do a small documentary with all these, like a photographic journey that Vinima and Sada had gone through. Vinima also took devotees on walking tours pretty much every day. With she never charged anybody for this service. It was something she rendered selflessly, and this went on for many years. So she would take people through the Bhiksha route where Baba would go. She would take them into the Sanstha, to all the samadhis, taking their own car. She and Sada would drive people to Rui, Neemgaon, and all the temples and significant places around Shirdi to give them, to propagate the history of Baba. And again, the scale of this seva, I don't think we can even fathom and comprehend, let alone speak about it. The book Ambrosia and Shirdi is very important because I feel, in a way, that does sum up this aspect of Ma's Seva, as well as some of the photographs they had taken are also in that book. So, for devotees who are new and who would visit Shirdi, I would recommend that the book Ambrosia and Shirdi is definitely read, because that book, in a way, does sum up a lot of work and seva Ma has done. At this moment in time, Volume 2 is already being published. Volume 1, we are in the process of editing. And Sada has actually gone to these various places. I requested him to send geotag these places. So we will be sharing the QR codes to all these respective places. So whenever someone visits Shirdi, they can go there quite easily. But it all comes back to Ma's years of research, going, finding out things that would have otherwise been lost quite easily. Speaking of the Charitra, the Sai Sat Charitra, in my first few meetings with Ma, I had asked her which edition should one read, because it was not very clear. There were so many various editions, the small edition, the big book. And she very lovingly explained to me that the original manuscript in Marathi was in poetic OV form, and that was then translated by various authors into English. And then we also had the abridged edition, which played its part in propagating Baba's life to many devotees from the 60s onward and still continues to do so. But she did encourage everyone to read the full edition also, because all of Baba's sayings and a lot is missed out in the abridged edition. So then we discussed which translations, are recommended by her, and her preferred translation was of Indra Kher. So this we had also made a small video about. While these discussions happened, she also made mention of the fact that a lot of Leelas were obviously not added into the Charitra because of the work becoming quite, it would have not come into one volume, and that the same was even mentioned by Hemad Pant. So I requested Ma if we could do a additional commentary on the Charitra, like complementary to each chapter, and it was during the time of COVID. We had these discussions, and obviously, as usual, she just rebutted the idea, saying, "No, no, no, at this age, why do you want to trouble me?" But I said, Ma, this is something that might otherwise get lost. And with the help of some other devotees, we all came together. And Sada also helped a very, very great deal, sitting with her every night and making these audio recordings, and we would edit them. So she gave a commentary on every chapter of the Charitra, where all the additional Leelas, additional information which we've shared on the channel. But during COVID, by Baba's grace, this great service happened, and she said she had this wish to do something on the Charitra, and Baba got that done through her. So, that I feel is a beautiful service Ma rendered to all of us. And in the coming times, this will also come into the form of a book by Baba's blessings. It may take some time, maybe another 6 to 8 months for it to come into print. But I do feel this also marks one of the great services Ma has rendered to us and the generations to come. Another thing I would hear her repeatedly tell people was whatever she shared, she would share free of charge, and she would request them to go share it with 5 other people. And she said that's how, people will know about Baba. They will know about his history and the significance, and most importantly, it would be preserved. So, hearing this, I asked her, I said, it's very important you make a record of your walking tour. You make a record of these things that you've been sharing with people over the years, because nobody can explain it as well as you can. And obviously, when we share things we hear, we also unknowingly tend to sometimes, certain facts are distorted in time. So, this also she agreed, and she did many series on the 5 samadhis, the places Baba would visit. Even these recordings were then done. Ma also made many references to certain books, some books by, say, Dr. Gavankar, some of the descendants that they had written. And I noticed these books were not very easily available. So when she would mention that read this and this book on this page, many of these print editions were not available on Amazon. And then I asked her, where do you source it from? So she would give me the source, but it was quite difficult to get it. Like, one had to make repeated calls. It took quite a long time and effort to get these books. So that actually then inspired the idea of House of Sai, where we could, for the benefit of devotees, procure the books Ma recommended and get them under one roof. So a record was made, they are available, and it's easier for devotees to get them. So, this also I would like to attribute to Ma and the time I've spent with her and these important list of books that she had written and given us. Ma was also very sensitive to the needs of animals, and in Shirdi in particular, I had seen her render a lot of service to the animals, especially the dogs. She would mention that whenever palkis would come, a lot of dogs would come with them on their journey because they were being fed with the palkis. And then they would come into Shirdi, and the palkis would return, the people would return by car, and these dogs would come into the territory of animals already staying there, and they would get into fights and get injured. So she was very sensitive to this. So she said it's very important people understand that when they come with the palki, that they don't encourage animals to travel with them, because when they leave, they may think they are doing something very nice, but later on it really hampered the life of the animal that came in. While she also said it's the animal's good fortune that they have Baba Shravan, but in large cases it would lead to injury and displacement. Ma was also particular about how animals were fed, and she was an advocate about people not feeding them glucose biscuits because dogs also would develop diabetes, and so much sugar was not good for them. So, from hair loss, and so she would tell many people about this, that don't feed dogs glucose biscuits. And personally, first hand accounts, I have seen her render service to them, make sure they get veterinary attention. And that service goes on even at Sai Korale temple. They even have an ambulance, they have a cow shelter. So at the temple there too, this seva continues. We would often spend time late evening after dinner or before dinner discussing the next day's shoots, and that would usually happen at Sada's home just before when he would return from the temple, if he was on time, because he was always busy, and that continues till today. And she loved her granddaughter, Sada's daughter Nandini. She was Nandini was the apple of the eye of Vinima, and she absolutely loved her. And there was a cute poem in Marathi, she would recite to her, like she would sing to her when she was small. Nandini ubhi raheli, koni nahi pahili. And both would just burst out laughing. And I would sit there, and all of us would just burst into a giggle. Sada would come, and these were very precious moments. At Ma's shrine at her home, behind Baba's large image to her right, I used to notice there was a Akhand Jyot that she would light. And it was slightly different. It was a floating wick they would put in oil in a little glass. So I asked her and Sada about it because I had never seen it before. What I had always seen was the cotton wick in a brass lamp, which is what I had seen everywhere. But then Ma mentioned that they had this little floating wick, which you can see on the screen now. So, this is something I found very easy, and many people, when we started lighting it in our shrine, many people asked about it, and I felt it may be something useful that even you may consider getting. It's very easily available on Amazon and every online store. It's just called floating wicks, and you can use any oil, preferably sunflower oil, in glass that is treated. So something like Borosil that will not crack with heat, and very easily you can have an Akhand Jyot. Baba was very particular and fond of light and lamps. So this is something I saw at her shrine always. Whenever I went, the Akhand Jyot was always on, and it was very easy to do. So I hope what Ma I picked up from Ma and I follow till date, and so many devotees have picked up from our shrine. I hope through this little segment you may also benefit from this. In the Prachar Seva Ma rendered, I also noticed she was very conservative with certain things, and for good reason. There were some authors that came to her, tried to give them their books, and in some cases, she even threw it back at them when she observed that some of the things they were propagating in Baba's name were not in alignment with Baba's history or life or teachings whatsoever. So she never minced her words. She was fierce, truthful, and didn't put up with nonsense, so to speak. And I think that's a great service she rendered to the next generation, because she's propagated the truth and not distorted it, which unfortunately I would like to mention. Today, with the internet and the advent of social media, there are a lot of, while there is a lot of devotion and it is increasing, at the same time, there's a lot of distortion in Baba's claims being made, certain things that happen, which even Ma never approved of. So I felt this was something very important to share, that she was conservative about this. Conservative in the sense propagated with the aspect of preserving it as it was, not adding anything of one's own. And that is seen in her writings, in her speech, in everything she did. She never added anything of her own. It was presented with the intent to preserve and propagate. That was it. One important seva Ma started in her lifetime was the setting up of the Sai Korale temple. In particular, this helped a lot of Padyatris. Those are people who actually walk from their hometowns to Shirdi as a pilgrimage. And Sai Korale, being a few kilometers away from the temple, becomes a very important place where they are offered a place to stay, given meals. They are even given medical care and assistance. And this is for hundreds of groups every few months. Like, there are large palkis that come, they have a large space, they are given to stay, food, all these facilities are provided. So this again I would attribute to Ma, her compassion, because she used to be part of these palkis and realize the difficulties devotees went through. And Sada in this has enormous credit even to him, because he's extremely hardworking, and so much so that Ma would complain that he would never give attention to his own family at home. So that continues till date, because he's always at the temple, always engaged in service. It is by Baba's grace. But I would say this is one service that started in Ma's lifetime and continues. And that flowering obviously is due to her efforts. In addition to the service they render to the Padyatris, they offer a lot of assistance to animals, they do medical camps and many other forms of seva. They even have a cow shelter there. They have Baba's holy stone, which they got from Shelke's home. So that also Stapna is in the mandir. And I feel every Baba devotee visiting Shirdi must go to Sai Korale temple and pay their respects there. What we can learn from Binima's life, her one pointedness to Baba. There was absolutely nothing and nobody else. There are so many devotees who will jump from here, jump there, go to this retreat, go here, go there, different gurus. For her, her entire universe was only Baba. Her email was Vinny only Sai. And that came into every aspect of her life. From the young age of 6, her Inanubandik ties with Baba was so deep that at such a young age, there's that saying, the Guru finds the Shishya. In her case, to have been blessed to meet Daskanu Maharaj, who came to her town. Narsimha Swamiji also came to their village, and her mother was very ill at the time, for those who don't know the story of her life. And he, by Baba's grace, was the medium through which her mother was miraculously healed. After which, Narsimha Swamiji instructed her father to do Baba's prachar, but she was a little young child at the time. So this goes to show the deep Rinanubandik ties with Baba, and Vinima would never ask even for moksha. She would ask that, Baba, if I get a next janma, may I come to you at an even younger age? So you see, her sentiment for Baba, I don't think any words anybody can say can ever touch on that. Her writing doesn't need to be spoken of, but one thing I definitely feel I would like to share about is she never added anything of her own, which is a great quality. There were no commentaries, no philosophies. She presented Baba's history as it was, with the pure intent that for the next generations it is preserved. And that I feel is a very rare quality. She, being a doctor and a pediatrician, was also extremely humble. She never referred to herself as Dr. Vinny Chitluri. As an author, she referred to herself as a compiler in all humility, and never took the credit for anything. So I feel that also is a very big thing. People with the kind of knowledge and experience she had, for arrogance and pride to set in, it's very easy, but she was very humble. Very humble. She was very particular about her research. She didn't rely on second-hand information. And one thing is, they would actually go on the ground. They've spent many decades in this seva. So everything came on first-hand accounts, having taken painstaking research. See, today there's a lot of translation. People very conveniently translate things, do things. Of course, that has value. But that's very different to actually going and spending years on the ground and doing that service, rendering that. So, that also I feel is a very beautiful thing Ma has rendered, for which we'll always be indebted to her. What can we do for Ma? I feel what would give her great joy is, in her own words, she would share whatever you learn, if you can share with 5 more people. So, to continue spreading Baba's history, teachings, and life would give her the greatest joy. And that would also fulfill this destiny that, she has lived. On an ending note, there are certain things that we are working on. One is, there are some unedited films of Ma that is a tour of the museum which is yet to be published. It was very difficult to edit these films after Ma left her body, but in the coming months, we hope we can continue to edit and share those. Ambrosia and Shirdi Volume 1 is also due to be published soon, which in a way is a very, very important book because it also sums up most of her life work. By Baba's grace, a biopic on Ma's life we will do with Sada. And most importantly, her service of the commentaries on the Satcharit are also coming into a printed book. So these will come together in time by Baba's grace. So there are no words really that can pay homage to Ma and what she has done for us. And I feel her own work speaks volumes, and for generations to come, we may only hopefully in time realize what she's done for all of us. So, with that, I would like to finish and close this film. Om Sai Ram.